So we do a ton of gear reviews and knives and guns and all that kind of stuff. But of all the knives and guns and gear that I have, there's only two things that I would never sell. There's two things that I believe are priceless and irreplaceable, and that's what I'm talking about here today. Well, hi friends, I'm Brian Cosby, and this is Provide and Protect. Today is a different video. Usually I'm doing reviews, I'm talking about prepping or guns or something else, knives. But today I want to talk about something a little bit different, and that is two things that I have that I would just never sell. In fact, these are things that I'm going to pass on to my kids one day. And one of them is this knife right here. See if you can see that right there. This is a knife that my grandfather used. He was a Marine in World War II, and he was on the battleship Iowa. And so this knife right here was one that he carried with him personally. He carved into the handle. I'll show you some B-roll here. But he carved into the handle some of the places that he went, some of the battles in which he fought as well. And he was not only on the Iowa, he did other things too. But 1942, went into the Marines just after graduating high school. And so he fought in World War II in the Pacific Theater. And so I got this knife when my grandfather passed away, and I've just come to love and cherish this knife right here. I've got hundreds of knives. I've reviewed tons of them for the channel here, but this is the one knife that I would never sell. This is the knife that means the most to me. So is it my favorite knife? It's a weird question. Is it my favorite knife? Not for daily use, because I'm not going to use this. This is something for me to remember, my grandfather. And there's some lessons that I learned from him, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. The other thing, though, so the knife is one thing, but my great-grandfather, they're both named Earl. I don't know if you know anybody today named Earl, my grandfather and my great-grandfather were both named Earl, so Earl Sr., Earl Jr., and so my great-grandfather fought in World War I, and he passed along his issue rifle right here. This is the 1903 Springfield. This is a 30-06, amazing. And I've actually shot this when I got it from my dad. So my great-grandfather passed it along to my granddad. My granddad passed it along to my dad. And one day, about 3-4 years ago, he gave this to me. This means so much to me, y'all. This rifle right here, bolt action. It's not loaded, obviously. So this rifle right here is just a classic, but there's so many marks and scratches and scrapes, but so well maintained. And he fought in Europe, my great-grandfather, with this rifle right here. So 1917, 1918. So I'm just, when I think about this rifle and what he used this for, over 100 years ago. Pretty amazing. So, but let me just mention a few lessons that I've learned from my grandfather. I didn't know my great-grandfather. He passed away when I was a baby, so I didn't know my great-grandfather. But my grandfather, by the way, this goes way back, even my own heritage. So I live in Tennessee. I'm not going to tell you where exactly, but I live in Tennessee. And my third great-grandfather fought in the Civil War here. But there's something meaningful to me about my own heritage, my own past. And so when I think about my grandfather and this knife right here, when I look at this knife, I don't even have the sheath anymore. I wish I did. I don't have the sheath anymore. But when it says Guadalcanal, on there, that he etched into the wood, that kind of thing. Australia, other places that he went during World War II. Now, this was not his issued knife. Of course, that's the K-bar in World War II. This is actually made by Russell Green River Works. So Google them. Look up Russell Green River Works. And that company that made this knife goes back to the 1830s. So a long time ago, they started making knives. And this was used on the western frontier in the U.S., well-known knife. And so what he did on this knife, I could tell that he actually sharpened the top part. So where the spine is, that would go all the way down, he actually sharpened that part as well down to make it more of a dagger type thing for combat in World War II. So he had his K-bar, but what I received from him was this knife, and this is the knife that he preferred. So when I think about my grandfather, there's a few things that come to mind, a few lessons that I've taken. And this, they call it the greatest generation, during World War II. I think there's some good reason for that. So one of them is his devotion to his wife, my grandmother. They were married for 62 years. So the average marriage in the U.S. today is 8.2 years. So, you think about that. There's less than 2% of marriages today that are over 60 years or more. So, for my grandfather, devotion was a big thing, that he was devoted to his wife for over 60 years, 62 years. It's incredible. I mean, we don't see that today, ever. Like I said, it's less than 2% today. So that's one thing I've learned from him is, man, I want to be devoted. I want to be devoted. I'm not the best in so many areas of my life, but this is one area I want to be devoted in, for sure. Another thing I learned from my grandfather, again, I wish I could have known my great-grandfather, but didn't have the chance. But one thing I learned from my grandfather was the sense of duty. This is something we've lost today, too. So when my grandfather was on the USS Iowa, the battleship, and he shot the guns, the 40-millimeter guns that were anti-aircraft guns. So the USS Iowa was like it's the flagship of the Iowa class of battleships in World War II. And so you think about the Marshall Islands, Okinawa, bunch of battles they fought in. But his job, my grandfather's job, was to shoot down the Japanese airplanes that were coming in, okay? And of course, as battleships or destroyers and other ships as well, they're trying to protect the aircraft carriers primarily. So they had these 16-inch guns, massive guns that could go 23 miles. That's how far these things could go, and penetrate to 30 feet depth of reinforced concrete. It's amazing what they could do back in the 1940s in World War II. But when I think about him in that sense of duty, that it's almost as if he didn't have an option. He was compelled to go. He was compelled to serve in the military. Now, I served in the military, in the Air Force, which I get it. If you're watching this, you're watching this, and you are in the military. You've served in the military, and you're like, okay, Air Force, okay, that's like country club military. Well, it's hard for me. Certain portions of it for sure. But my grandfather went through Parris Island, Marines, and when I think about his sense of duty, as soon as he graduated high school, he wanted in. He felt compelled to do that. We don't have that today, I feel like, in our culture. Maybe some people, and I know some people that are, and I'm grateful today for those that have that sense of duty still to our country. A second thing I learned, though, was honor. There's a sense of pride that goes with to serving, not just protecting yourself and your family, but also your community, and maybe even more so your nation. So that idea of just serving with a sense of honor in your nation is something I feel is lost today. There's a pride of I'm serving. There's a sense of respect and honor that goes with that I feel like is just not around today as much. A third, though, that I think about is his own faith. My grandfather was a man of faith. He was a Christian. He served in this church faithfully as an elder. He was always praying. Every time I remember being at my grandfather's house, we would end every prayer with, he would just say, amen and amen, And he was always reading the Bible, listening to Christian radio. It had a big impact on me. What was most important for my life was really thinking about that sense of faith. And so, I think about his devotion, his duty, his honor, his faith. That's what I think of when I look at this knife right here. Is it much? No. I don't even know how much this would have cost back then. 5 cents. I don't know, back, inflation now. But this knife right here with the brass rivets and everything on here, every time I look at this, I think of my grandfather. He was the sweetest, kindest man, but he was dangerous. He was dangerous. May we be those kinds of men today that are dangerous but good. Good, dangerous men is what we need today. Men that have that sense of duty and honor, of faith, of devotion, like those kinds of things I've learned. And I'm trying to instill into my kids, especially my boys in particular. So that's what I think about when I see this knife. When I see this rifle and I hold this rifle, I'm thinking, man, I'm holding a piece of history here. In my generation now, holding this goes back over 100 years, 122 years for this rifle in particular. Since my great grandfather, got that, was issued that in World War I. So guys, this is a different video, I know, but I'm just kind of thinking back to how my own family lived, my history, my ancestry. I've gone to ancestry.com. I've traced back my family back through the Civil War to the 1700s, back to James K. Polk on my mom's side. And it's just something about that we've lost, I think, in our culture today, a sense of family history, of honor, of duty. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. If you've done that before, if you've looked back, or maybe you have something, maybe it's not a knife or a gun, but maybe it's something else. These are the only two things I have from my grandfather and my great-grandfather are these two things. And it's kind of funny with my channel today. And it didn't hit me until this morning. And I saw this knife. I was trying to clean up my room. I saw this knife. I was like, man, what an amazing piece of memory that is to me. And I'm not sure if you guys have something like this. Maybe it's not a knife. Maybe it's something else. But, maybe you express that. I think it's always good to just express your gratitude for those who've gone before you, your own family. And maybe you can just drop that down below. I'd love to. I read all the comments. I think this year I've read 4,000, 5,000 comments. Try to respond to everything I can. But please drop that down below. I'd love to read, something that maybe someone in your family has left to you, has left behind. And would love to share those stories together. So, well, thanks so much for your support for us and for our channel, and we will see you in the next video.